What if falling asleep meant listening for footsteps, feeling the wind shift, and trusting a shelter made of hide and poles to keep you alive until morning? Tonight, you lie down inside a Native American teepee, where darkness isn't empty. It's watchful, alive, and quietly testing whether you'll survive the night. Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the dark, stepping off the modern grid and onto the open plains, where the sky feels impossibly wide and the night air presses close against your skin. You stand there for a moment, listening, realizing that sleep here is not an escape but a negotiation with cold, animals, weather, and your own nerves. You probably won't survive this, not without learning a few things fast, at least. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive as the last light drains from the horizon, that thin band of orange fading into a deep, bruised blue. The plains stretch outward in every direction, flat and honest, offering nowhere to hide and nowhere to lean. This is where the night matters. This is where sleep becomes an act of resilience. Ahead of you stands the teepee, tall, conical, calm in its geometry, its silhouette cutting cleanly against the sky. You feel a strange comfort in that shape, even before you understand it. Historians agree that plains nations like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Blackfoot refined the teepee over generations into one of the most efficient mobile shelters ever designed, especially for sleeping through brutal nights. But standing here now, you don't think in academic terms. You think, will this thing really keep me alive? You step closer, running your hand over the hide. It's thick, supple, and faintly scented with smoke, animal fat, and weather. That smell, you realize, is not unpleasant. It's grounding. The hides, often buffalo, are stitched carefully, overlapping just enough to shed rain and trap warmth. There's a mainstream historical fact that tends to surprise people. A properly built teepee can stay warm in winter and cool in summer, all without modern insulation. You can feel that promise already as the wind slides around the structure instead of slamming into it. The conical shape doesn't fight the weather. It cooperates. If modern houses had egos, teepees would be the monks of architecture. As you duck inside, the world changes instantly. Outside, the wind has teeth. Inside, it lowers its voice. The fire pit sits at the center, quiet now, just a bed of glowing embers breathing slowly. Above, the smoke hole opens to the stars, adjustable flaps angled with careful intention. This isn't random. Teepees are traditionally oriented with their entrance facing east, greeting the rising sun and turning their backs to prevailing winds. You didn't choose this spot tonight. Someone with generations of night knowledge chose it for you. Historians still argue whether this orientation began as spiritual symbolism or pure environmental pragmatism. But as a cold draft fails to find you, the debate feels pleasantly irrelevant. You sit, then lower yourself onto bedding made of layered hides and grasses. It's firmer than your mattress at home, but there's a quiet logic to it. Soft enough to insulate, firm enough to keep your body off frozen ground. You stretch your legs and feel heat lingering, stored from the day and protected from the night. Communal sleeping defines this space. People sleep close, not because it's cozy in a modern sense, but because shared warmth is survival math. Body heat stacks. One human plus another equals less shivering. Add a child, an elder, maybe a dog, and suddenly the night has fewer sharp edges. This isn't about privacy. This is about mourning. You become aware of sound in a new way. There are no walls thick enough to mute the world. You hear the flap of hide shifting gently, the sigh of wind through grass, the distant call of something alive and hungry. Sleep here is light, layered, and alert. You don't pass out the way you do in a dark bedroom with blackout curtains and a locked door. You drift. You float near the surface. You nap with one ear open like a phone that never fully powers down. There's a quirky tidbit scholars love to mention. Many plains people slept in short cycles, waking briefly through the night to tend the fire, check the weather, or simply listen. If you've ever woken at 3 a.m. for no reason and blamed stress, congratulations, you're accidentally doing prehistoric sleep maintenance. The fire is everything. It is warmth, light, comfort, and danger all at once. Too big, and the teepee fills with smoke. Too small, and the cold creeps back in like an unpaid bill. Managing that balance becomes an art form. You learn quickly that fire isn't something you turn on and forget. It's a relationship. The smoke hole flaps above you adjust airflow, creating a draft that pulls smoke upward while drawing fresh air in low. It's simple physics, refined by centuries of trial and error. Historians still argue whether certain flap configurations were standardized across tribes or taught primarily through hands-on family tradition. But either way, the result is the same. You can breathe, sleep, and not wake up coughing like you camped inside a barbecue. Your eyes adjust to the low light. Shadows stretch and soften along the curved walls. Everything feels closer here, contained but not trapped. The teepee doesn't shut the world out. It filters it. You realize how different this is from modern sleep, where silence and darkness are engineered to erase awareness. Here, awareness is the point. Night is not the enemy, but it is not ignored. You listen because listening keeps you alive. Wolves don't announce themselves. Weather doesn't knock first. Sleep becomes an agreement. You rest, but you stay reachable. There's humor in the adjustment, too. Your legs tangle awkwardly with someone else's blanket. And for a moment you wonder how people manage this without starting nightly arguments. Then it clicks, arguing wastes warmth. Also, everyone smells vaguely like smoke, which turns out to be an equalizer. No one's judging anyone's deodorant choices when the whole camp smells like a campfire had a personality. That's joke one, by the way. You're welcome. As the embers pulse, stories begin. Nighttime is when stories live. During the day, there's too much work, too much movement. After dark, voices soften, pacing slows, and memory takes center stage. Stories teach children when to fear, when to laugh, when to stay quiet. They also help bodies relax without fully surrendering. There's a mainstream historical understanding that oral storytelling played a critical role in education and cultural continuity, especially during winter nights when movement was limited. A fringe tidbit some anthropologists love is that repetitive story rhythms may have helped synchronize breathing and heart rates, easing listeners into sleep without knocking them out cold. Think of it as ancient ASMR minus the microphones. You lie back, eyes half closed, watching sparks drift upward and vanish into the smoke hole, carrying tiny pieces of fire into the stars. The sky above feels closer than it ever does through a window. You can see constellations shift as the earth turns, slow and patient. There's comfort in that motion. It reminds you that the night moves, even when you stay still. Historians still argue whether star knowledge influenced camp placement and sleep timing more than seasonal weather patterns. But lying here, you feel both at once, the cosmic and the practical braided together. The cold tests you. It always does. A draft sneaks in near the ground, brushing your ankles like a reminder not to get cocky. Someone adjusts a hide, feeds the fire, and the balance returns. You realize how collective this process is. No one sleeps alone here, even when their eyes are closed. Someone is always half awake, always listening. That role shifts naturally without alarms or schedules. It's an early form of night watch, woven seamlessly into rest. Modern security systems could learn a thing or two, though admittedly they don't snore, which is a point in their favor. You think about how fragile this all looks from the outside. Holes, hides, fire, and yet it works. It has worked through blizzards, heat waves, migrations, and centuries of change. That's the quiet resilience of it. Sleep here isn't indulgent. It's strategic. Every decision, the direction of the door, the size of the fire, the placement of bodies, serves the same goal: waking up. When people talk about roughing it, they often miss this intelligence. This isn't primitive. It's precise. As you finally let your breathing slow, you notice how your body adapts. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. You're not asleep, not fully, but you're no longer tense. You're in that in-between state modern life rarely allows. It's not the deepest sleep, but it's enough. Enough to restore, enough to stay ready. enough to carry you to morning. You might miss your pillow, sure, and your phone charger, absolutely. But there's something deeply steadying about knowing exactly why you're awake when you're awake, and exactly why you're resting when you rest. Outside, the wind shifts again, testing the teepee's resolve. Inside, nothing changes. The structure flexes, breathes, and holds. You smile faintly, realizing that tonight, at least you're not fighting the dark. You're sharing space with it. And as your thoughts slow and the fire settles into a gentle glow, you understand the first lesson of sleep on the plains. Darkness isn't something to defeat. It's something to learn from, one quiet, watchful night at a time. You wake without fully waking, that half state where your eyes stay closed but your senses lean forward. Something has changed. The wind. It no longer presses evenly against the hide. It slides, curls, and glides around the teepee as if it has been politely redirected. You don't know it yet, but this is design doing its quiet work. This is why the teepee faces the way it does. Not toward beauty, not toward convenience, toward survival. You roll slightly, feeling the bedding shift beneath you, and notice how the cold never quite lands. Circles, probes, then gives up. The entrance flap remains calm, barely fluttering, while outside the grasses hiss and bend. The door faces east, greeting the sunrise that hasn't arrived yet, but more importantly, turning its back to the prevailing winds that sweep the plains from the west and northwest. This isn't superstition. It's meteorology learned the hard way. A mainstream historical fact taught in many anthropology courses is that plains nations consistently oriented their teepees to reduce wind intrusion and improve smoke ventilation. Orientation wasn't optional. It was bedtime insurance. You imagine what happens if someone ignores this rule. The wind barges straight in, steals heat, kicks up ash, and turns sleep into an endurance test. Facing the wrong direction isn't rebellious. It's just uncomfortable. And here's your first light joke of the section. The wind doesn't care about your individuality. It will humble you immediately. Nature has no interest in your creative vision. The poles themselves tell part of the story. They're not placed randomly or symmetrically in a modern, architectural sense. They lean into one another, crossing near the top, creating tension that stabilizes the entire structure. When the wind pushes, the teepee doesn't resist like a brick wall. It flexes, redistributing force down the poles and into the ground. Engineers today would call this dynamic load management. The people who perfected it called it not getting flattened at 3 a.m. Historians still argue whether certain pole configurations were standardized across tribes or adapted more freely based on local materials and wind patterns. But the underlying principle remains the same. Work with the wind, not against it. You shift again, listening. The sound of the wind is different now. Less aggressive, more like a low, constant breathing. That's no accident. The conical shape deflects airflow upward, reducing turbulence at ground level. This means fewer drafts crawling across sleeping bodies. It also means the fire stays predictable. Flames that flicker too wildly waste fuel and throw sparks. A calm fire is a safe fire. You don't need to see it to know it's behaving. You can hear it. There's a steady rhythm to it, a soft crackle that says, "I'm under control." There's a quirky tidbit scholars like to mention when discussing teepee orientation. Some elders could reportedly feel when a teepee was angled incorrectly before stepping inside, based purely on airflow and sound. Whether that's skill, intuition, or just decades of practice is up for debate, but you're starting to understand how that sensitivity develops. After enough nights like this, your body becomes an instrument. You don't measure comfort. You sense it. The smoke hole above you is part of the same system. Its flaps aren't decorative. They're adjustable wings, angled with long poles to catch or block wind as needed. Tonight, they're positioned to create a gentle draft that pulls smoke upward while preventing downdrafts from dumping cold air inside. This balance allows the fire to burn cleanly, minimizing smoke buildup while preserving warmth. Historians still argue whether this design emerged independently among multiple plains cultures or spread through intertribal knowledge exchange. But lying here, you don't care who invented it first. You care that your lungs feel clear. You take a deeper breath, noticing how the air smells faintly of hide, ash, and dry grass. Not stale, not sharp, just lived in. Modern houses aim for sealed perfection, trapping air behind layers of insulation and plastic. The teepee breathes. It inhales and exhales with the night. That breathing is what makes sleep possible here. Silence isn't the goal. Balance is. Outside, a stronger gust tests the structure. You feel it as pressure, not panic. The poles creak softly, like an old ship settling into a wave. Nothing shifts. Nothing rattles. The wind flows up and around, robbed of its bite. This is where the second light joke sneaks in. If the wind were a rude guest, the teepee is the host who gently but firmly guides them back toward the door. You think about modern camping tents, all thin fabric and zippers, flapping like nervous birds at the slightest breeze. They fight the wind, and the wind always wins. The teepee doesn't flap. It holds. The hides are heavy, anchored, and slightly porous, allowing pressure to equalize instead of ballooning inward. There's a lesson here that goes beyond shelter, but you'll let that philosophical thought drift for now. Sleep like simplicity. The entrance flap deserves its own respect. It's layered, overlapping, and weighted at the bottom, sealing naturally against drafts. When opened, it doesn't gape wide and invite chaos. Parts just enough. This design allows quick exits if needed, important when weather turns or danger approaches, but remains tight during rest. You imagine fumbling with a zipper in freezing wind and feel grateful for gravity and common sense. Joke number 3. Sometimes the smartest technology is just letting things hang where they want to. Your body adjusts again, finding warmth in the shared space. Orientation influences more than wind. It shapes how people arrange themselves inside. Sleeping areas are positioned with airflow in mind, keeping the coldest currents away from children and elders. Tools rest where they won't block movement. Firewood stacks where it won't steal heat. Everything has a place because everything affects sleep. This is spatial awareness sharpened by consequence. There's a mainstream historical understanding that teepee placement within a camp also followed wind logic. Camps were arranged to create windbreaks, using multiple teepees to shield one another. A lone shelter is vulnerable. A group becomes a system. Historians still argue whether these arrangements were formally planned by leaders or emerged organically through shared experience. But either way, the result was communal resilience. You're not just sleeping in a teepee, you're sleeping inside a strategy. As the night deepens, temperature drops further. You feel it at the edges of your awareness, like a dimmer switch turning slowly. Yet inside, the change is muted. The orientation continues doing its work hour after hour, long after conscious thought fades. This is design meant for unconscious use. You don't have to remember to adjust it while asleep. It remembers for you. You find yourself thinking about the knowledge required to choose this spot, this angle, this moment. It's not written down. It's not diagrammed. It's passed through watching, correcting, and sometimes failing. Someone once set a teepee the wrong way and shivered all night. Someone else noticed, learned, and never forgot. That memory becomes tradition. Tradition becomes habit. Habit becomes survival. Historians still argue whether such knowledge should be classified as engineering, architecture, or environmental science, but labels feel small compared to lived reality. Another gust slides over the structure, stronger than before. You wait for discomfort that never arrives. Instead, there's a strange comfort in knowing the wind is there, doing what it does, while you remain untouched. Modern sleep often relies on denial, earplugs, white noise, climate control, to erase the environment. This sleep includes the environment without surrendering to it. You're aware, but not alarmed. That balance is rare. Your breathing slows, syncing with the steady airflow. You realize how much energy modern life spends fighting elements that older designs simply accommodate. Air conditioning battles heat. Heating battles cold. Soundproofing battles noise. Here, everything negotiates. There's give and take. It's quieter inside not because the world is muted, but because it's redirected. You think briefly about how strange this all would seem to someone raised entirely indoors. How sleeping requires geometry, wind knowledge, and trust. Then again, trusting drywall and central heating isn't exactly instinctual either, we've just normalized it. The difference is that this trust is visible. You can see the poles. You can feel the hide. You can hear the wind doing what it was always going to do, just somewhere else. As you drift closer to true sleep, you notice the stars shifting through the smoke hole, the earth turning beneath you. The entrance waits for dawn, already aligned to welcome light instead of punishment. Orientation isn't just about defense. It's about rhythm. You sleep knowing the morning will arrive gently, not blasting in with cold and chaos. That knowledge relaxes something deep in your chest. Your thoughts slow, then stretch, then soften. The wind continues its endless journey across the plains. But tonight it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the night, to the grass, to the sky. You rest inside a shape that understands this relationship better than most modern buildings ever will. And as sleep finally settles in, not heavy, not forced, just enough, you learn the second lesson of the plains. Survival often begins with simply facing the right direction. You don't see the fire so much as you feel it. Even with your eyes half closed, its presence presses gently against your skin. A soft insistence that keeps the cold from getting ideas. The flames are low now, deliberately so, reduced to glowing coals that radiate steady heat without drama. This isn't a campfire meant for singing or showing off. This is a sleep fire, a night fire, a carefully restrained force that understands its role. Fire here is not background decoration. It is technology. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that controlled indoor fire allowed plains nations to extend activity and rest safely into the night, even during brutal winters. But the word controlled does a lot of work. You learn quickly that fire management is less about dominance and more about conversation. Feed it too much and it grows unruly, sending sparks upward and smoke sideways. Starve it and the cold creeps back like it's been waiting patiently for an invitation. Someone stirs beside you, reaching toward the fire pit with a practiced motion, adding a single piece of wood, just one. The flames respond politely, brightening for a moment before settling again. This isn't guesswork. This is muscle memory passed down through watching, correcting, and occasionally coughing through mistakes. Historians still argue whether fire-tending roles were formally assigned or rotated naturally during the night, but lying here, you sense how instinctively it happens. Whoever is lightest asleep becomes the caretaker, drifting back into rest once balance is restored. The firelight reshapes the space. Shadows stretch and contract along the curved walls, turning the teepee into a living thing that breathes with the flames. Faces appear, then soften back into silhouettes. Tools glint briefly, then disappear again. This low, shifting light keeps your mind engaged without overstimulation. It's just enough visual movement to prevent anxiety, not enough to keep you alert. Modern lighting designers would charge a fortune to recreate this effect, and still probably get it wrong. There's a quirky tidbit anthropologists love to bring up. Firelight flickers at a frequency that some researchers believe may help induce relaxed brain states. Whether that's true or not, you can feel something happening. Your thoughts slow. Your breathing deepens. The edges of worry blur. If this were a wellness retreat, someone would call it intentional ambience. Here it's just Tuesday night. You become aware of how the fire structures time. Without clocks or screens, the rise and fall of its intensity marks hours. A brighter phase signals storytelling or quiet conversation. A dimmer phase invites rest. No alarms. No notifications. Just light responding to human need. There's a joke here, you're first of the section. If the fire ever sent a push notification, it would simply say, "Hey, you're cold." And honestly, that's all you'd need. Smoke management is inseparable from sleep. The fire burns cleanly, its smoke lifting upward toward the open hole above, guided by the same airflow that keeps you warm. When done correctly, smoke never settles. Passes through like a guest who knows not to overstay. This isn't accidental. Fire placement, fuel choice, and airflow work together. Dry wood reduces smoke. Low flames reduce sparks. Proper draft carries the rest away. Historians still argue whether certain woods were preferred primarily for heat or for their cleaner burn. But tonight, your eyes don't sting, and that feels like a settled debate. You inhale slowly, testing the air. It's warm but not heavy, scented but breathable. Smoke, in small doses, even serves a purpose beyond heat. It discourages insects, preserves hides, and leaves that familiar scent that marks the teepee as lived in and protected. Some scholars suggest this constant low-level smoke also helped reduce parasites in bedding, a fringe tidbit that makes you appreciate the smell a little more. Suddenly, smoky doesn't sound so bad when the alternative is itchy. The fire also defines social space. People gather closer when it's bright, spreading out as it dims. Sleeping positions shift subtly in response. You notice how children are placed nearer the warmth, elders shielded from drafts. Tools rest within reach but never in the way. Everything orbits the fire, including sleep itself. You don't fall asleep randomly. You fall asleep when the fire invites you to. Another gust of wind brushes the teepee, testing the system. The fire responds with a slight flicker, then steadies. That responsiveness matters. Fire that reacts predictably to wind is safe fire. Unpredictable flames wake you up, keep you tense. This one reassures. You trust it the way you trust a well-trained animal to behave. Your second light joke arrives quietly. You realize that tending a fire through the night is basically the original still watching? Prompt. Except if you ignore it, you freeze instead of missing the next episode. Motivation is everything. As your body settles, you notice how heat moves. Warm air rises, cool air sinks. The fire's placement at the center allows heat to circulate evenly, preventing cold pockets from forming. This is basic physics applied intuitively. Modern heating systems rely on ducts, fans, and thermostats. This relies on shape, placement, and patience. Historians still argue whether people consciously understood these principles or simply refined what worked over time, but the outcome is undeniable. You are warm without feeling smothered. The fire is also a guardian. Its light keeps predators cautious. Most animals think twice before approaching flame. Even humans behave differently in its presence. Firelight exposes movement, discouraging stealth. It's not a wall, but it's a warning. Sleep feels safer knowing that anything approaching must first announce itself in silhouette and shadow. You don't need floodlights when you have a controlled glow that says, "I see you." Your thoughts drift toward the stories you heard earlier. How many begin with fire at the center, creation tales, lessons, memories passed along in this very light? Night stories aren't just entertainment. They are training. They teach what to fear, what to respect, what to remember. Listening while half asleep, you absorb them differently. They sink in sideways, bypassing analysis and settling somewhere deeper. Historians still argue whether this timing made stories more memorable, but judging by how long they lasted, something worked. The fire dims further now, shifting the mood. Conversation fades. Breathing synchronizes. The glow becomes more suggestion than illumination. This is the cue. Your body recognizes it, responding without instruction. Muscles loosen. Your jaw unclenches. Sleep approaches not as a switch flipping off, but as a tide rising slowly around you. There's a third joke here, barely audible even in your own head. If modern sleep apps tracked firelight instead of REM cycles, half of humanity would finally relax. You smile faintly, then let the thought dissolve. You listen to the soft crackle of embers, the occasional pop as resin releases. Each sound reassures rather than startles. This is white noise with meaning. Every sound has a cause you understand. Nothing is random. Random noises wake you up. Meaningful ones let you rest. You become aware of how different this feels from sleeping in darkness pierced by electronic glow. There's no blue light here, no buzzing chargers, no blinking indicators reminding you of unfinished tasks. Firelight demands nothing. It doesn't want your attention constantly. It simply exists, doing its job, asking only to be respected. That respect shapes your behavior, even as you drift. Another small piece of wood is added, almost ceremonially. The glow strengthens just enough to carry everyone deeper into the coldest hours before dawn. This timing matters. The fire peaks when the night is hardest, then slowly fades as morning approaches. Sleep here is synchronized with the environment, not imposed upon it. Historians still argue whether people planned this timing consciously or learned it through generations of cold mistakes. But either way, the rhythm feels ancient and precise. Your breathing slows further. The warmth wraps around you without clinging. You feel protected but not enclosed, alert but not anxious. This balance is rare, and it's held together by flame. Fire that doesn't roar. Fire that listens. As your thoughts blur into dreamlike fragments, you realize how much trust this requires. Trust in the people around you. Trust in the structure above you. Trust in the fire to behave. That trust allows rest. Without it, sleep would be shallow and fragile. With it, even the dark feels manageable. The embers glow steadily, like a heartbeat you don't need to monitor. You let go a little more, drifting closer to true sleep, knowing that if something changes, wind, cold, sound, the fire will be the first to tell you. And in that quiet partnership between flame and flesh, you learn the third lesson of the plains. Warmth is not something you demand from the night. It's something you maintain gently, together. You wake again without the sharp edge of alarm, just a soft awareness that your body has shifted closer to someone else in the dark. An elbow, a shoulder, a shared blanket edge. Nothing dramatic, nothing awkward, just proximity. Sleeping close here isn't a sign of intimacy in the modern sense. It's an equation. Bodies equal heat. Heat equals survival. You don't apologize for it. No one expects you to. The space inside the teepee feels fuller now, not crowded but occupied with purpose. Each person's position has meaning, shaped by age, strength, and need. Children are nestled toward the warmest center, elders protected from drafts, adults forming a living barrier along the edges. This arrangement isn't written down anywhere. It's learned. A mainstream historical fact is that communal sleeping was common among many indigenous cultures, particularly in harsh climates, because it conserved warmth and allowed for shared vigilance. Privacy, as you understand it, is a luxury that comes after safety. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the balance. The warmth you feel isn't just from the fire. It's from the slow, steady exchange of heat between bodies. Your breathing begins to sync with the person beside you, a subtle rhythm that lowers tension. Modern science would talk about co-regulation, heart rates, and nervous systems influencing one another. Here, it's just called sleeping the smart way. There's a quirky tidbit you remember reading somewhere. Groups of people sleeping together can raise the ambient temperature of a shelter by several degrees without adding fuel. That's not a fun fact here. It's a strategy. Every degree matters when the night bites. Historians still argue whether people consciously calculated these benefits or simply followed what felt right. But either way, the math works out in your favor. You notice how movement is minimal. No one thrashes. No one spreads out like a starfish. Space is respected because space is valuable. If someone needs to turn, they do it slowly, signaling with a shift of weight rather than sudden motion. This unspoken etiquette keeps sleep intact. It also keeps tools from being knocked over, fire from being disturbed, and tempers from flaring. You realize how much modern sleep assumes isolation, your own bed, your own room, your own climate bubble. Here, sleep is social. Your first light joke of the section drifts in. You suddenly understand why "don't touch me, I'm sleeping" never really caught on in survival cultures. Cold has a way of making personal boundaries very negotiable. The communal arrangement also creates layers of awareness. Someone near the edge sleeps lighter, closer to the outside world. Someone near the center sinks deeper, trusting others to listen. These roles aren't fixed. They rotate naturally as people shift through the night. If you find yourself waking more often, you might be closer to the perimeter than before. If you sleep more deeply, someone else has taken that watchful place. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious system or an emergent behavior, but it functions like a quiet relay race of attention. You become aware of the sounds of sleep around you. Soft breathing, an occasional sigh, the rustle of hides. None of it startles you. In fact, silence would feel wrong now. Sound confirms presence. Presence confirms safety. A completely quiet night would mean something has gone very wrong. This is another adjustment modern life hasn't prepared you for, the idea that noise can be comforting. You feel a small body shift near the center, a child turning in sleep. An adult adjusts a blanket instinctively, without opening their eyes. This is learned responsiveness, the kind that develops when nights are shared over years. You don't need to speak. Your hands already know what to do. There's a mainstream historical understanding that child-rearing in many Plains cultures was highly communal, extending into nighttime care. Babies weren't isolated in separate spaces. They were integrated into the group's rhythm. Their needs met quickly and quietly. There's also vulnerability in this closeness. You are seen even in sleep. Your breathing, your movements, your presence all register with others. But vulnerability cuts both ways. You are also protected. Predators, intruders, sudden weather changes. Anything that disturbs the night disturbs everyone at once. You don't wake alone to deal with it. That knowledge relaxes something deep in your chest. Your second joke arrives softly. If you snore here, you learn very quickly to roll over. Peer review is immediate and merciless. The bedding beneath you matters more than you expected. Layers of hides and grasses create insulation from the ground, which steals heat faster than air ever could. Sharing bedding amplifies this effect. Edges overlap, sealing gaps. Feet tuck under someone else's blanket edge, not by accident but by habit. It's a puzzle that assembles itself nightly, each piece warming the next. You think about how modern mattresses prioritize softness, individual comfort zones, and motion isolation. Here, firmness matters more. You want stability, not bounce. A shifting surface would wake everyone. This firmness also keeps bodies aligned, reducing pressure points over long nights. Historians still argue whether people experienced less back pain or simply accepted discomfort as normal, but you notice that your body feels supported in a way that's different, not worse. The fire's warmth pulses outward, met by the warmth of bodies. Together, they create a stable microclimate. You realize that if one person left suddenly, the temperature would change. Absence would be felt. This interconnectedness makes leaving the sleeping group at night a deliberate act, never casual. You don't slip away without notice. Even rest has accountability. Outside, the wind continues its long conversation with the plains. Inside, the sound is softened by layers of hide and human presence. The teepee feels smaller now, but also stronger, reinforced by life. It's no longer just a structure. It's a gathering of heat, breath, and trust. Your thoughts drift to the idea of loneliness. Modern sleep often isolates, even when shared with one other person. Separate blankets, separate routines, separate schedules. Here, loneliness doesn't fit. Even if you're quiet, even if you're new, you're part of a cluster of warmth. That doesn't solve every problem, but it makes the night less heavy. Historians still argue whether communal sleeping affected dream patterns or emotional resilience, but lying here, you sense how deeply it changes the experience of rest. Dreams feel less private, less urgent. If you wake from one, the presence of others grounds you quickly. You don't spiral. You breathe, listen, and settle again. A slight adjustment ripples through the group as someone near the edge shifts position. The movement travels gently, like a wave, then fades. No one wakes fully. This is coordination without communication, a shared understanding of how to exist together in limited space. It's subtle, but it's powerful. Your third joke floats up as you finally relax into stillness. You realize that this many people sleeping together would absolutely destroy a modern sleep hygiene influencer's career. And yet, here you are, warm, calm, and very much alive. As the night deepens, the communal arrangement holds. Heat stays where it's needed. Awareness stays distributed. No single person bears the full weight of vigilance. Sleep becomes something you do together, not something you escape into alone. And in that shared rest, you learn the fourth lesson of the plains. Safety multiplies when warmth and responsibility are shared. You notice the weight before the warmth. A heavy pull across your shoulders, solid and reassuring, like the night itself has decided to stay put. The buffalo robe settles into place, its mass pressing gently against you, sealing in heat without smothering. This isn't a blanket in the modern sense. It's insulation with memory, thick, uneven, alive with texture. You shift beneath it and feel warmth gather, slow and patient. Animal hides are doing most of the quiet work here. A mainstream historical fact is that buffalo robes were among the most valuable materials on the plains, used for clothing, shelter, bedding, and trade because of their exceptional insulating properties. The fur traps air, the hide blocks wind, and together they create a barrier that outperforms many modern materials. You don't need a thermal label to understand this. Your skin already knows. You run your fingers along the inner surface, feeling the dense underfur. It's soft, but not delicate. Built for weather, not display. The outer side, facing the cold, is tougher, sometimes decorated, sometimes plain. The robe is folded strategically, fur side in, hide side out, maximizing heat retention. This isn't random. It's learned technique, passed down through observation and correction. Someone once folded it wrong and shivered. That lesson stuck. There's a quirky tidbit that circulates in historical discussions. A well-prepared buffalo robe can keep a person warm even when frost forms on the outside. You're not eager to test that theory tonight, but you can imagine it. The idea that ice can form on your bedding while you remain warm underneath feels almost like a magic trick. Historians still argue whether this effect was widely understood or simply experienced and accepted, but lying here, you believe it. The weight of the hide matters as much as its warmth. Presses down gently, reducing air gaps where cold can sneak in. It also calms your nervous system the way weighted blankets do today. Modern sleep science would nod knowingly at this, but the principle existed long before the terminology. Pressure equals comfort. Comfort invites rest. You breathe a little deeper. You notice how the hides are layered. Not just one thick piece but multiple robes overlapping. This creates pockets of still air, the true source of insulation. Air that doesn't move can't steal heat. The ground beneath you is layered too. Grasses, reeds, additional hides, separating your body from frozen earth. Cold ground is ruthless, pulls heat relentlessly. These layers slow that theft to a crawl. Your first light joke of the section slips in. You realize that the phrase sleeping on the ground is deeply misleading. You're not on the ground. You're hovering above it in a carefully engineered stack of animal-based technology. You adjust the robe around your feet, tucking the edges under someone else's blanket. Shared insulation is more efficient than individual coverage. Gaps disappear when materials overlap. This is communal warmth in material form. You're not just sharing body heat, you're sharing resources. No one hoards the warmest hide. Distribution follows need, not ownership. Children and elders get the thickest layers. Adults make do with less. That hierarchy is practical, not sentimental. Historians still argue whether hide preparation techniques varied significantly between tribes or converged due to similar environmental pressures. Either way, the results are impressive. Hides are scraped, stretched, smoked, and softened until they become flexible yet durable. Smoking adds water resistance and preserves the material, extending its lifespan. That smoky scent you noticed earlier? It's not just atmosphere, it's preservation. You inhale again, catching that familiar smell. It's comforting now, associated with warmth and rest. Smoke-treated hides also resist insects, a fringe tidbit that matters more than you'd think. Less itching means less movement. Less movement means better sleep. Sleep here is protected from 1,000 small irritations modern bedding never considers. The robe shifts as someone beside you moves slightly. It doesn't slip away. Its weight keeps it in place. This stability matters. You don't wake up cold because a corner flipped back. The hide stays where it's put, respecting gravity and intention. Modern lightweight blankets would betray you instantly out here. You think about how much work goes into making one of these robes. Hunting, skinning, cleaning, stretching, smoking. It's labor-intensive and communal. Each robe represents days of effort and cooperation. That investment changes how you treat it. You don't toss it aside casually. You care for it, repair it, pass it down. Sleep is supported by craftsmanship. Your second joke arrives quietly. Suddenly, buffalo robe maintenance sounds like a very niche but extremely practical YouTube channel. The temperature drops again outside, deeper into the night's coldest stretch. You feel it at the edges, a subtle tightening of the air. Inside, under the hides, the change is barely noticeable. Heat lingers, stored and shared. The robe breathes just enough to prevent dampness while holding warmth close. This balance is critical. Trapped moisture would chill you faster than cold air ever could. The hide's natural properties manage this exchange effortlessly. There's a mainstream historical understanding that indigenous peoples of the plains developed clothing and bedding systems finely tuned to their environment, often outperforming European materials when settlers first arrived. Wool coats froze stiff. Canvas tents flapped uselessly. Buffalo robes, by contrast, thrived. Historians still argue why it took so long for newcomers to adopt these methods more widely, but comfort, it seems, is sometimes slower than pride. You settle deeper, feeling the robe mold slightly to your shape. It's not tailored, but it adapts. Your body heat softens it just enough. This responsiveness adds to the sense of being held rather than covered. You feel cocooned without feeling trapped. Your thoughts drift to the animal itself, the buffalo, once numbering in the tens of millions across the plains. Every part was used: meat, bone, sinew, hide. Nothing wasted. The robe on you is part of that relationship. Sleep here is intertwined with respect, necessity, and survival. You don't romanticize it. You simply acknowledge it. Another fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some sources suggest that different parts of the hide were chosen for different uses, with thicker sections reserved for bedding and thinner ones for clothing. Whether this was universal or situational, the logic is sound. You can feel the thickness where it matters most. The fire crackles softly, adding a little more warmth to the system. Heat from below, heat from bodies, heat trapped by hides. It's a layered defense, not reliant on any single element. If the fire fades briefly, the hides hold. If someone shifts away, the layers compensate. Redundancy is survival's favorite design principle. Your third joke sneaks in as you drift closer to sleep. If modern emergency kits came with buffalo robes, half of winter would suddenly feel much less dramatic. You feel secure now, insulated from cold and noise alike. The robe muffles sound, softening the world further. Your breathing slows, deepens. Muscles relax under the steady pressure. The night outside continues its tests, but they don't reach you easily. As sleep settles in more fully, you understand the fifth lesson of the plains. Warmth isn't just about heat. It's about weight, layering, and materials chosen with care. Wrapped in hide and shared effort, you rest not because the night is gentle, but because your shelter and knowledge are stronger. You sleep, but not the way you're used to. It's lighter, thinner, like a veil instead of a curtain. Your eyes stay closed, your breathing steady, yet part of you remains tuned outward, listening. Sound replaces walls here. It becomes your perimeter, your early warning system, your map of the dark. In this place, hearing is safety. The first thing you notice is how much you can hear. Not louder, exactly clearer. The scrape of grass bending under wind. The soft flutter of the smoke flaps adjusting themselves. A distant animal call that pauses, then resumes. Each sound has weight and direction. You don't panic at them. You catalog them. Your mind sorts familiar from unfamiliar with surprising ease. A mainstream historical fact is that many indigenous cultures relied heavily on auditory awareness at night, especially in open landscapes where visual cover was limited. Listening while sleeping wasn't a flaw. It was a skill. Children learned early what normal night sounded like. Anything that broke that pattern demanded attention. Historians still argue whether this heightened awareness was trained deliberately or emerged naturally from necessity. But lying here, you feel how quickly your own senses adapt. You catch yourself waking slightly as the wind shifts. Not fully awake, just alert enough to register the change. The teepee responds before you do, redirecting the airflow, but your body still notes it. This kind of micro-awakening doesn't exhaust you. It reassures you. You drift back down knowing nothing needs action. Modern sleep science might call this fragmented sleep, but here it's functional sleep. Different goal, different definition. There's a quirky tidbit some researchers like to mention. People sleeping in groups with shared vigilance often experience fewer full awakenings despite lighter sleep overall. The responsibility is distributed. You don't have to investigate every sound alone. If something truly matters, everyone will feel it. That shared awareness lightens the mental load. A soft rustle near the edge of the teepee draws your attention. Someone shifts position, perhaps closer to the fire, perhaps responding to a dream. The sound is familiar, safe. You relax again. Your brain quickly learns the difference between internal movement and external intrusion. A branch snapping outside would have a sharper edge, a different echo. You'd know. Your first light joke drifts in. You realize that after a few nights like this, your brain could probably pass a wilderness sound recognition exam with honors. The absence of silence becomes noticeable. There's always something. Wind, fire, breath, fabric. Silence, if it came, would be alarming. Silence would mean wind dropped suddenly, animals went quiet, the fire died unexpectedly. Silence would be a message. This flips a modern assumption on its head. In your bedroom, silence is the goal. Here, it's a warning sign. You notice how your breathing synchronizes with ambient sound. The steady crackle of embers sets a rhythm. The wind's low hiss smooths out irregular thoughts. You don't need white noise machines when the world itself provides texture. Each sound has context. Context makes it soothing. Listening while you sleep also keeps you oriented. Even with eyes closed, you know where you are in the space. Fire crackles at the center. Wind brushes the west side more strongly. The entrance flap rustles faintly to the east. Sound creates a mental map, allowing you to remain grounded even in dreams. You don't wake disoriented. You wake informed. Historians still argue whether this constant low-level awareness affected dream content. Some suggest dreams in such environments were more situational, less abstract, tied closely to daily life and survival. Whether that's true or not, you notice that your own half-dreams are practical images of movement, shelter, warmth, rather than surreal nonsense. Your mind stays close to the ground. A distant howl floats across the plains. It's far enough not to demand action, close enough to sharpen your senses. Wolves communicate over long distances, and this sound carries information. Location, number, intent. You don't need to interpret it consciously. Your body responds with a slight tension, then releases when no further cues follow. The fire glows. The group remains still. Safe enough. Your second joke slips in quietly. Suddenly, true crime podcasts feel like extremely poor sleep aids. The teepee's materials contribute to this soundscape. High dampens sharp noises but lets low frequencies pass through. You hear the character of the night without being assaulted by it. This filtering effect is another layer of protection. Sudden loud sounds would still break through, but constant background noise softens into something manageable. Historians still argue whether this was an intentional acoustic choice or a fortunate byproduct of materials, but either way, it works. You become aware of how listening keeps your mind engaged just enough to prevent fear from spiraling. Fear thrives in imagination. Sound provides evidence. Evidence calms you. You don't have to guess what's happening outside. You can hear it. When nothing changes, you relax. Someone near the edge clears their throat softly, awake enough to check the night. No words are exchanged. Words aren't necessary. The sound itself communicates presence and readiness. You feel a wave of reassurance pass through the group, subtle but real. You settle deeper. Your third joke surfaces gently. If modern homes had built-in human presence sounds, half of insomnia would disappear overnight. The night stretches on. Hours pass marked not by clocks but by changes in sound. Wind rises, then falls. The fire crackles, then quiets. Breathing deepens around you. Each shift nudges your awareness, then lets it fade again. This ebb and flow replaces rigid sleep cycles. You don't chase deep sleep. You allow rest to come and go. There's a mainstream historical understanding that pre-industrial sleep often included periods of wakefulness throughout the night, sometimes called segmented sleep. Listening fits naturally into this pattern. You're not failing to sleep, you're sleeping in stages. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was universal or situational, but here it feels like the right fit for the environment. As the coldest hours approach, sound sharpens again. The night feels more alert. You match it. Not anxious, just present. Your body remains warm, supported by hides and shared heat. Listening doesn't cost you energy now. It's become effortless. You drift again, this time deeper. Sounds fade to the edges, still present but less demanding. Your mind loosens its grip, trusting that if something truly changes, sound will pull you back. That trust allows genuine rest to take hold. And in that balance between sleep and listening, you learn the sixth lesson of the plains. Rest doesn't require shutting the world out. Sometimes the safest way to sleep is to keep one ear open and let the night tell you when to move and when to stay still. You don't wake to a bell or a buzz. You wake to change. The sound of wind shifts again, lighter now, carrying a different smell. Less dry, more damp. Somewhere far off, water moves. The night is telling you something about the season, even before dawn arrives. Sleep here is never detached from the calendar. It moves with it. Seasonal camps shape seasonal sleep. Where you rest, how long you rest, and how deeply you rest all change as the year turns. A mainstream historical fact is that many plains nations followed seasonal migration patterns tied to buffalo movements, weather, and resource availability. These shifts weren't just about food. They reorganized nightly life. Winter camps slept differently than summer ones. Your body feels that difference instinctively. Tonight's camp is positioned with colder months in mind. The teepee is angled tighter, hides layered thicker, fire tended more carefully. In summer, this same structure would breathe wider, allowing heat to escape and air to circulate. You imagine the contrast. Warm nights, open flaps, people sleeping lighter, more spread out. Here, in colder seasons, sleep draws inward. Everything compresses toward warmth. There's a quirky tidbit historians sometimes note. Some groups adjusted sleeping schedules seasonally, with longer rest periods in winter and shorter, more fragmented sleep in summer when daylight stretched late into the evening. Whether this was universal or varied by tribe is debated, but you can feel the logic. When nights are long and cold, rest becomes a resource to be conserved. You shift beneath the hides, aware of how your body responds differently now than it would in another month. Muscles relax more deeply when they know daylight is far off. Your mind drifts slower, less eager to wake. Seasonal sleep isn't lazy. It's adaptive. It matches energy output to environmental demand. Your first light joke arrives softly. You realize that the concept of sleeping in makes a lot more sense when winter is actively trying to kill you. The camp itself changes with the seasons. In winter, teepees are placed closer together, forming windbreaks and shared warmth zones. In summer, they spread out, allowing breezes to pass through. These arrangements affect sleep directly. Closer camps mean more ambient warmth and sound, deeper communal rest. Spread out camps mean more airflow, lighter sleep, easier waking. Historians still argue whether these layouts were centrally planned or emerged through tradition, but the seasonal logic is unmistakable. You think about how modern life tries to keep sleep the same year-round. Same bedtime, same temperature, same lighting. Here, sameness would be inefficient. Your body needs different things in different months. Winter sleep is longer, heavier, more protected. Summer sleep is lighter, more responsive. Neither is better. Both are necessary. Outside, the wind carries the promise of weather. Maybe snow later, maybe rain. You don't worry about it now. Seasonal knowledge has already shaped your shelter and your rest. The teepee's design anticipates these changes. Hides can be added or removed, flaps adjusted, fire size modified. Sleep responds in kind. Your breathing slows further as you settle into the seasonal rhythm. You notice how the fire is tended more generously in winter nights, fed at intervals that anticipate colder hours before dawn. Someone has already planned for that even as they sleep. This foresight is woven into habit. You don't need to think about it now. Your second joke slips in. You suddenly understand why ancient calendars were basically survival tools and not just pretty stone decorations. Historians still argue whether people perceived seasons more through astronomical observation or environmental cues like animal behavior and plant cycles. Lying here, you realize it's both. You feel the season in your bones, in the way your body clings to warmth, in the way sleep deepens when darkness stretches long. Dreams shift with the season too. Winter dreams feel slower, heavier, more repetitive. They circle familiar themes: warmth, shelter, togetherness. Summer dreams, you imagine, would be more scattered, more restless. This isn't mysticism. It's biology responding to light and temperature. Your body knows what time of year it is, even without a calendar. A subtle movement near the entrance catches your attention. Someone checks the flaps, ensuring they're angled correctly for the night's changing wind. This is seasonal vigilance. Winter wind behaves differently than summer breeze. Cuts sharper, sneaks lower. Sleep adapts by staying alert to these shifts. Historians still argue whether such adjustments were made on a strict schedule or purely by observation. But here, observation wins. Your third joke arrives quietly as you drift again. You realize that seasonal affective disorder probably hits very differently when your entire life is already designed around winter. You think about children growing up with this rhythm, learning from an early age that sleep isn't fixed. It stretches and contracts with the world. This flexibility builds resilience. You don't fight the season, you ride it. That mindset changes how you experience rest. Instead of frustration, there's acceptance. The cold outside deepens, but inside the layered system holds. Seasonal preparation shows its value now. Extra hides, closer bodies, a fire fed just enough. This is winter sleep at its most refined. Not indulgent, but sufficient. Enough to restore without waste. You sense that dawn is still hours away. The night feels long, but not endless. Seasonal awareness removes impatience. You don't count minutes. You measure rest by readiness. When morning comes, you'll wake when it's time to move, not when an alarm demands it. As sleep settles deeper once more, you absorb the seventh lesson of the plains. Rest is not a fixed routine. It's a seasonal practice, shaped by weather, light, and movement. When sleep follows the year instead of fighting it, the night becomes less of an obstacle and more of a partner. You notice it most clearly when a child stirs. The movement is small, just a knee pulling up, a hand searching for warmth, but the response is immediate and quiet. An elder shifts closer, a blanket edge adjusts, a murmur hums low and steady. No one fully wakes. No one needs to. Night roles here are distributed by age, experience, and trust, not by titles. Children sleep closest to the fire and the deepest center of the teepee. This isn't indulgence, it's strategy. A mainstream historical fact is that many indigenous plains societies place children near the safest, warmest areas at night, both to protect them from cold and to keep them within easy reach. You feel how instinctive this arrangement is. Children generate less heat, lose it faster, and sleep deeper. They need the core. Elders, meanwhile, occupy positions of quiet authority. They often sleep where sound travels clearly, near entrances or along the inner perimeter, places that require lighter sleep and sharper awareness. Age doesn't remove responsibility here, it refines it. Elders may rest, but their presence shapes the night. Their breathing, their occasional cough, their subtle movements signal continuity and calm. When an elder sleeps easily, everyone else does too. Historians still argue whether these placements were rigidly defined or flexibly adjusted each night, but lying here, you sense the truth is somewhere in between. Habit sets the pattern. Circumstance tweaks it. A sick child moves closer to warmth. A tired elder rests nearer the center. The roles respond to need, not dogma. You think about how different this feels from modern ideas of independence. Children sleeping alone in separate rooms, elders isolated in silence. Here, separation would feel reckless. Night doesn't care about personal growth narratives. Night cares about survival. Your first light joke of the section arrives gently. You realize that bedtime negotiations probably went very differently when the cold itself was the authority figure. The night teaches children without lecturing them. They learn by listening, by feeling when the wind shifts, by noticing how adults respond or don't to certain sounds. Over time, children internalize the soundscape of safety. They know which noises mean nothing and which ones matter. This learning happens in sleep as much as in waking. You imagine a child drifting in and out of dreams, absorbing patterns without conscious effort. Elders contribute stories, even after lights dim. Not long narratives now, but fragments, reminders, jokes, half-whispered memories. These aren't random. They reinforce norms. Where to place the firewood, how to fold a hide, why the entrance stays clear. A quirky tidbit often mentioned by anthropologists is that elders sometimes deliberately told shorter, unfinished stories at night, encouraging children to remember and ask about them later. Curiosity survives the night. The roles extend beyond warmth and listening. Elders often know the night medicines, the herbs that calm coughs, ease pain, or settle restless minds. If someone wakes uneasy, an elder's hand might reach for a small pouch, a familiar scent offered quietly. This knowledge isn't dramatic. It's practical. Keeps sleep intact. You notice how the elder's presence reduces anxiety. Even when nothing is happening, their calm steadiness communicates safety. This isn't authority through force. It's authority through familiarity. The night respects those who've lived through many of them. Your second joke slips in softly. You realize that elders here are basically the original overnight moderators, keeping everything calm without banning anyone. Children, in turn, influence the night more than you'd expect. Their deeper sleep encourages adults to remain alert. Their warmth draws others inward. Their dreams sometimes spill out in murmurs, little sounds that ripple through the group. These sounds aren't ignored. They're acknowledged gently, reassuring the child without waking them fully. This responsiveness keeps fear from taking root. A mainstream historical understanding is that indigenous child-rearing emphasized constant proximity, especially at night, fostering strong attachment and rapid response to distress. This wasn't sentimentality. It was efficiency. A crying child in the cold wastes energy and attracts attention. A soothed child keeps the night smooth. You feel how this arrangement shapes responsibility. Adults don't disappear into sleep. They remain available. But availability doesn't mean exhaustion. Because roles are shared, no one carries the full weight. Elders listen more than they move. Adults adjust more than they speak. Children rest deeply. The system balances itself. Historians still argue whether these night roles were explicitly taught or simply absorbed through observation. Watching seems enough. After a few nights, you already know where to place yourself, when to move, when to stay still. The night trains you quickly. You hear an elder clear their throat softly, a signal more than a sound. Someone nearer the edge adjusts position. The wind has shifted again. No conversation, no fuss. The response is immediate and proportionate. This economy of action preserves sleep. Overreaction is as disruptive as neglect. Your third joke arrives quietly. You realize that group chats would be very unpopular here. Too much unnecessary noise. Elders also serve as memory keepers of bad nights. Storms that tore through camps. Winters that stretched food thin. Predators that tested boundaries. These memories inform caution without breeding fear. You sense that their lighter sleep isn't anxiety-driven. It's practiced attentiveness. They've learned what matters and what doesn't. Children absorb these lessons indirectly. They don't need every detail. They need tone. Calm responses teach calm expectations. Panic teaches panic. Tonight, calm wins. You think about how modern life often assigns night roles to devices, alarms, monitors, cameras. Here, roles belong to people. That human presence changes the emotional texture of sleep. You're not watched by machines. You're watched by those who care whether you wake up. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some researchers suggest that shared nighttime roles may have strengthened intergenerational bonds more effectively than daytime activities alone. Whether or not that's provable, you feel the closeness it creates. Sleep becomes a shared achievement. Your fourth joke sneaks in as you settle again. You realize that kids these days don't listen. Is probably much harder to argue when everyone literally learned by listening all night. As the hours pass, the roles hold. Children remain warm and unaware. Elders remain lightly alert. Adults bridge the space between. No one announces these positions. They simply exist, renewed each night by habit and necessity. You drift closer to deeper sleep, reassured by the soft signals around you. The presence of age and youth together steadies the night. And in that balance, you learn the eighth lesson of the plains. Sleep is strongest when every generation has a place, and the night is held by many hands at once. You don't fall asleep all at once. Instead, you drift, hover, and return, caught in that strange in-between where thoughts loosen and images begin to wander on their own. In this place, dreams are not dismissed as nonsense. Here they matter. You sense it in the way no one rushes to silence a murmuring sleeper, and in how certain dreams are remembered, quietly, with care. A mainstream historical fact is that many Native American cultures, especially among Plains, Lakota, Cheyenne, and other nations, treated dreams as meaningful experiences that could carry guidance, warnings, or insight. You feel the weight of that belief even before morning comes. Dreams aren't private accidents. They're part of the shared mental life of the camp. As you rest inside the teepee, the boundary between waking and dreaming feels thinner than you're used to. Firelight flickers through your eyelids. Wind breathes through the smoke hole above. Sounds drift in and out. Soft breathing, a hide creaking, a distant animal call. These sensations feed directly into your dreams. Nothing is sealed off. Your mind keeps listening. Historians still argue whether dreams were interpreted consistently across tribes or varied widely between families and individuals, but you sense one common thread. Dreams were taken seriously without being taken literally every time. Not every dream demanded action. Some were simply noted. Others were discussed. A few were remembered for years. You slip into a dream where movement feels slow and deliberate. Perhaps you're walking across the plains, perhaps you're flying just above them. It's unclear, and no one here would demand clarity. Ambiguity is allowed. When you stir slightly, no one startles you awake. Dreams are not interruptions. They're part of the night's work. Your first light joke arrives gently as you half-wake. You realize this is the only culture where saying, "I was asleep," is not considered an excuse, but a valid source of information. Some dreams are believed to come from personal memory. Others are thought to come from ancestors, animals, or the land itself. You notice that no one insists on a single explanation. Flexibility keeps belief from becoming brittle. The night remains open to interpretation. Elders, when awake enough, sometimes take mental note of who is dreaming restlessly and who sleeps deeply. Not to control them, just to observe patterns. A child who dreams of water repeatedly might be watched more closely near rivers. A hunter dreaming of animals might be encouraged, gently, toward certain paths later. These are nudges, not commands. A quirky tidbit often mentioned by ethnographers is that some dream guidance was intentionally vague, encouraging personal reflection rather than blind obedience. Dreams weren't instruction manuals. They were conversations. You like that idea? It gives dreams dignity without giving them tyranny. You drift again, this time into a dream filled with voices rather than images. They don't speak in full sentences. It's more like tone, approval, caution, curiosity. When you wake briefly, you don't feel disturbed. You feel accompanied. The night hasn't abandoned you to unconsciousness. It stayed nearby. In the quiet, you remember how modern culture often treats dreams as disposable. Just a dream. Here, that phrase would feel dismissive. Not offensive, just incomplete. Dreams are experiences you had, and experiences shape you, whether awake or not. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on dreams increased during times of stress, migration, scarcity, conflict, or whether it remained steady across generations. Lying here, you suspect stress sharpened attention, but belief was always present. Night is too long to ignore what happens inside it. Your second joke slips in as you adjust your position. You realize that telling people about your dreams is usually annoying, unless everyone genuinely thinks your subconscious might be onto something. Some dreams are shared at dawn, quietly, while the fire is rebuilt. Others remain private, carried silently for years. The choice belongs to the dreamer. This autonomy matters. Dreams are not extracted. They are offered. You sense that this respect makes dreaming safer. When you know your inner world won't be mocked or exploited, it relaxes. The mind opens more easily. Sleep deepens. Even unsettling dreams lose some of their sting when they are allowed to exist without judgment. Animals often appear in dreams here, not as symbols to be decoded but as presences. A bison might appear simply as itself, powerful, calm, observant. Whether that means strength, warning, or nothing at all is left open. Meaning isn't forced. It emerges over time. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that this open approach to dreaming may have reduced anxiety and night terrors, especially in children. When dreams are discussed calmly rather than feared or dismissed, they lose their power to frighten. You feel that calm now. Even your own strange images don't alarm you. Your third joke surfaces softly. You think about how nightmare interpretation books would do very poorly here. Too many answers, not enough listening. The teepee creaks again. Wind shifts. Someone exhales more deeply. You feel the collective rhythm of sleep adjust, like a shared tide. Dreams ripple through the group, unseen but present. Some minds roam far. Others rest blank and heavy. Both are acceptable. You drift into a deeper dream now, one without narrative. Just sensation, warmth, motion, the sense of being held. When you briefly surface, you don't rush to remember it. You trust that whatever mattered will stay. This trust is learned. It comes from living in a culture where inner experiences are respected, not ridiculed. You imagine how different sleep would feel if you always had to defend your dreams. Or worse, pretend you didn't have them. Historians still argue whether dream practices changed after contact with Europeans and missionaries, many of whom discouraged or reinterpreted indigenous dream traditions. You sense the loss that would bring. When dreams are silenced, a whole layer of night goes quiet. Here, for now, the layer remains. You breathe. You dream. You wake and drift again without fear. The night holds both worlds, waking and dreaming, without forcing a choice between them. As the hours slide toward dawn, dreams soften. They don't vanish. They loosen their grip. You sense the coming of morning not by light, but by a subtle change in mental texture. Thoughts grow steadier. Images slow. You rest there, suspended, understanding the ninth lesson of the plains. Sleep is not the absence of meaning. It's where meaning speaks most softly and sometimes most honestly. You wake without sitting up. No one announces morning, and yet something has shifted. The fire is being coaxed back to life with careful breaths, not sparks. The air smells faintly of smoke and yesterday's hide. It's still dark enough that shadows feel close, and that's exactly when stories begin. Nighttime storytelling isn't entertainment here. It's preparation. A mainstream historical fact is that many Native American nations reserved certain stories for winter nights or after dark, believing that darkness made listening sharper and memory stronger. You feel that now. In the low light, words land differently. They stick. Stories start small. A phrase murmured near the fire. A memory prompted by a sound. No one clears their throat dramatically. No one says, "Listen up." Attention gathers on its own. Even half asleep, you find yourself leaning in. The stories are not always about heroes. Often they're about mistakes. Someone wandered too far. Someone ignored the wind. Someone laughed at the wrong moment. These stories don't shame. They instruct gently through example. You absorb the lesson without feeling taught. Historians still argue whether these stories were primarily educational or spiritual, but lying here, you sense the distinction doesn't matter. The effect is the same. You're calmer, wiser, and more prepared by the time the story ends. Your first light joke arrives quietly. You realize this is the only bedtime story genre where the moral is sometimes don't be that guy. The darkness protects the storyteller. Faces are indistinct. Gestures are minimal. The voice does the work. This anonymity allows honesty. People can admit fear, confusion, even failure. The night listens without judgment. Some stories repeat often. You notice certain phrases returning night after night, like anchors. These repetitions aren't boring. They're reassuring. Familiarity tells you the world is still understandable, even when it's dangerous. A quirky tidbit recorded by early observers is that storytellers sometimes paused intentionally in the middle of a tale, leaving listeners suspended overnight. The ending would come the next evening. This wasn't cruelty. It trained patience and memory. You smile at the thought, grateful you're not 8 years old waiting all day for the conclusion. Animals feature heavily, but not as cartoons. They behave like animals, smart, hungry, sometimes foolish. A coyote trick backfires. A bison refuses to move. The lessons are subtle. Cleverness has limits. Arrogance invites trouble. Cooperation keeps you alive. Your second joke slips in as you imagine modern children hearing these tales. You realize once upon a time would feel wildly irresponsible compared to pay attention. This could kill you. Stories also establish emotional boundaries. Some topics are avoided at night. Grief too raw, anger too sharp. Others are encouraged. Resilience, humor, endurance. The night shapes not just what is said, but what is held back. Historians still argue whether nighttime storytelling strengthened group cohesion more than daytime instruction. You suspect it did. There's something about shared vulnerability in the dark that daylight can't replicate. When you listen together in near silence, bonds tighten. You feel how storytelling smooths the transition back to sleep. No sudden laughter, no raised voices. The cadence stays even, like a lullaby for grown minds. The story winds down naturally, leaving space rather than demand. Your third joke drifts in softly. You realize cliffhangers were invented long before streaming services, just with better blankets. Some stories are meant to be remembered exactly. Others are expected to change slightly with each telling. This flexibility keeps them alive. Accuracy matters, but relevance matters more. A story that no longer fits the world is allowed to adapt. You notice how children are not forced to listen. They drift in and out, catching pieces. That's enough. Stories don't need total attention to do their work. Fragments linger and resurface later, often when needed most. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that storytelling after dark helped regulate stress hormones, lowering anxiety before sleep. Whether or not that's measurable, you feel the calm it brings. The fire settles. Breathing deepens. As the last words fade, no one claps. No one comments. Silence returns gently, like a blanket being pulled up. The story doesn't end the night. It merges with it. You lie back, mind full but unburdened. Images replay softly, not demanding interpretation. The story has done its job. It has reminded you how to act, how to endure, and how not to panic. You understand now the 10th lesson of the plains. Stories told after dark don't entertain the night. They train you to survive it without stealing your sleep. You don't see them first. You hear them, or rather, you notice the absence of certain sounds. The insects pause. The wind seems to hold its breath. Even the fire changes its voice, crackling lower, tighter. This is how you learn that something is out there, just beyond the circle of light. A mainstream historical fact is that wolves, coyotes, and other large predators frequently approached human camps on the plains, drawn by scent, movement, or simple curiosity. You feel the old truth of that now. Fire deters, but it does not erase risk. Darkness tests boundaries. No one panics. That's the first lesson. Panic wastes energy and reveals weakness. Instead, you sense subtle readiness ripple through the teepee. A body shifts. A hand rests more firmly on a tool. Breathing slows. Awareness sharpens without noise. Historians still argue whether predators posed a constant threat or a manageable background risk. But lying here, you understand how the threat feels regardless of statistics. One wrong sound, one careless movement, and the night could turn suddenly personal. Your first light joke surfaces quietly as tension rises. You realize that, don't worry, it's probably nothing, has been historically inaccurate for most of human existence. The fire is the anchor. Its glow defines the safe zone, not just physically but psychologically. Even predators seem to respect its boundary. You imagine glowing eyes stopping short of the light, calculating. The fire crackles once, as if reminding everyone who's in charge. You listen harder now. Wolves don't usually attack groups, but they test edges. They learn. The night is their classroom too. A rustle near the perimeter draws attention, but no reaction. Movement without response communicates confidence. Predators read that. A quirky tidbit often noted by trackers is that predators can distinguish between alert and inattentive camps by sound alone. A confident stillness discourages approach more effectively than frantic noise. You feel how intentional calm becomes a survival skill. Someone clears their throat softly, not fear, but signal. Another adjusts position closer to the entrance. Tools remain within reach, but unseen. Readiness without display. The night is watching and subtlety matters. Your second joke arrives as you remember modern alarm systems. You realize how expensive technology just tries to recreate what quiet human awareness does for free. Historians still argue whether predators influenced camp layout as much as weather did. From here, the influence feels undeniable. Sleeping positions, fire placement, and even story timing are shaped by what might be listening outside. The sound comes again, closer. You can't tell what it is, and that uncertainty sharpens everything. Your senses stretch outward, filling gaps. This is how humans survived long before floodlights and fences, by learning to read incomplete information. No one speaks. Speaking would narrow attention. Silence keeps perception wide. You're surprised how awake you feel without moving. Sleep has layers, and this one hovers just above full alertness. Your third joke drifts in nervously. You realize this is the least convincing relaxation exercise you've ever experienced. Eventually, the sounds shift away. The insects resume. The fire relaxes. The night exhales. You feel the group's tension ease in unison, like a shared muscle unclenching. No celebration. No commentary. Survival doesn't need applause. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that these repeated low-level night alerts trained human nervous systems to recover quickly from stress, rather than staying stuck in fear. You feel that recovery now. Heart rate slows. Breath deepens. The body learns resilience through repetition. You think about how modern fear often arrives without resolution, alerts without closure. Here, fear comes and goes with context. Something approaches. It leaves. The cycle completes. Sleep resumes. Historians still argue whether humans or predators learned more from these encounters. Lying here, you suspect both adapted. The night shaped them together. You settle back down, tools still near but mind calmer. You don't force sleep. You let it return on its own. Trust grows not from denial, but from experience. As you drift again, you understand the 11th lesson of the plains. Predators don't just threaten the night. They teach you how to stay present, calm, and alive within it. Sleep never fully settles. Just as your breathing deepens and thoughts begin to loosen, the weather reminds you who truly controls the night. A gust presses against the teepee, making the hides tighten and sigh. The sound is low and deliberate, like something large turning over in its sleep. A mainstream historical fact is that plains weather could shift rapidly at night. Winds rising suddenly, temperatures dropping fast, storms arriving with little warning. You feel how that unpredictability shapes every decision. Shelter is never finished. It's constantly tested. Historians still argue whether sudden weather changes were more dangerous than predators. But lying here, you understand how the two feel similar. Both arrive unseen. Both demand immediate adjustment. Both punish complacency. The first raindrops come softly, almost politely. They patter against the hide roof, spaced and tentative. You don't move yet. No one does. This is the assessment phase. Light rain can be ignored. Heavy rain cannot. Your first light joke appears as the sound increases. You realize that weather apps would feel deeply offensive here. Too confident, too late. The rain strengthens. The hide darkens and tightens as it absorbs moisture. This is intentional. Properly prepared hides swell slightly when wet, closing small gaps and improving waterproofing. A quirky but true detail is that rain can actually make a well-made teepee more weatherproof. You feel that reassurance settle in. Someone rises quietly to adjust a pole angle. Another checks the fire, reducing flame and increasing coals. Smoke changes direction, guided carefully through the opening above. These movements are practiced, almost automatic. No one complains. Weather doesn't care how tired you are. Historians still argue whether such night adjustments disrupted sleep significantly or became background noise over time. From where you lie, it feels like both. You wake enough to adapt, then slip back down again. The wind arrives next. Presses, then pulls, testing seams and anchors. The teepee responds with creaks and flutters. You listen closely. Each sound tells a story. Tension holding, stakes firm, structure sound. This is not chaos. It's communication. Your second joke drifts in as the structure holds. You realize this is the only tent that sounds alive, and that's somehow comforting. Cold follows. Temperature drops quickly after rain, and you feel it in your hands and face. Bodies shift closer together. Hides are pulled tighter. Heat is conserved without discussion. Communal sleeping proves its value again. No one needs to ask for warmth. It's already shared. A mainstream historical understanding is that indigenous groups developed sophisticated responses to cold using layered bedding, body heat, and fire control rather than insulation alone. You feel how effective that system is. It's not luxurious, but it's resilient. Historians still argue whether sleep fragmentation, waking briefly to adjust to weather, reduced overall rest quality. Lying here, you suspect the opposite. These micro-wakings keep you from deeper danger. They're protective interruptions. Your third joke surfaces softly as you resettle. You realize that sleeping through the storm is not a virtue. It's a gamble. The rain eventually eases. The wind slows. The teepee relaxes. It sounds softening. You sense the structure's relief. Yes, relief. After hours of tension, everything settles. The fire breathes easier. Smoke flows cleanly upward again. You drift towards sleep once more. But now your dreams carry traces of weather. Wind becoming breath. Rain becoming rhythm. The mind incorporates what the body experiences. There's no separation. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that repeated exposure to night weather may have tuned circadian rhythms differently, making people more adaptable to interrupted sleep. Whether or not that's provable, you feel adaptable now. You don't fight wakefulness. You flow with it. The night grows colder, but stable. That stability is earned, not assumed. You appreciate the quiet competence around you, the way everyone responds without drama. Survival here is not heroic. It's procedural. Historians still argue whether weather awareness was primarily taught or instinctively learned. You suspect it was both. Children watch. Adults correct gently. Experience does the rest. You lie still, breathing steady, as the last drops fall away. The night has tested you and moved on. Sleep deepens again, layered over readiness. You carry the 12th lesson of the plains with you into that deeper rest. Weather doesn't interrupt sleep. It shapes it, teaches it, and reminds you to stay flexible within the dark. You notice your breathing before anything else. Not because it's difficult, but because it's deliberate. Each inhale carries a faint edge of smoke. Each exhale disappears into the shared air of the teepee. Breathing here is not automatic background noise. It's part of the night's balance. A mainstream historical fact is that the teepee's adjustable smoke flaps and central fire were carefully engineered to manage airflow, allowing smoke to escape while drawing in fresh air near the ground. You feel this design working even now. Cool air slides in low, warm air lifts out above. The shelter breathes with you. Historians still argue whether early observers underestimated the sophistication of indigenous shelter design, often mistaking simplicity for primitiveness. Lying here, that misunderstanding feels almost insulting. Nothing about this is accidental. Every draft, every opening, every angle serves a purpose. The stars matter too. When the smoke hole clears briefly, you glimpse them, sharp, steady points above the shifting dark. You don't stare long. Stargazing is tempting, but it cools the body and distracts the mind. Even the sky must be rationed at night. Your first light joke drifts in as you pull your bedding closer. You realize this is the only bedroom where ventilation doubles as astronomy. Breathing becomes a group activity without anyone saying so. When the fire flares, someone adjusts a flap. When smoke thickens, another movement answers it. No alarms, no coughing fits, just quiet corrections. The night rewards attentiveness. A quirky tidbit recorded by some ethnographers is that experienced sleepers could detect airflow changes subconsciously, waking just enough to adjust position or signal others before smoke became uncomfortable. You sense that threshold now, how close discomfort sits to sleep. Historians still argue whether long-term exposure to smoke caused health issues or whether ventilation minimized harm. The truth is likely complex. Tonight, though, the smoke is mild, almost grounding. It smells like warmth, not danger. Your second joke slips in as your eyes sting briefly. You realize air quality complaints would sound very different when the alternative is freezing to death. Breathing slows. The body adapts. Lungs accept the rhythm. This adaptability isn't heroic. It's learned. Children grow into it. Elders guide it. The night enforces it. You think about silence, not its absence, but its texture. There is no sealed quiet here. Every breath, every shift, every faint crackle registers. Instead of disturbing sleep, this low-level soundscape stabilizes it. Silence that's too perfect would feel suspicious. Historians still argue whether humans evolved to sleep better with background noise rather than absolute quiet. Lying here, you suspect quiet without context feels unsafe. Sound confirms continuity. Life is still happening. Your third joke arrives softly as the fire settles. You realize white noise machines are just very expensive attempts to imitate fire. The balance between smoke, stars, and breath holds steady. You don't intervene. You trust the system. Trust, you realize, is essential for sleep. Without it, the mind stays alert. With it, the body lets go. Someone shifts near the entrance, momentarily blocking airflow. The smoke responds instantly. A hand lifts, a flap adjusts, balance restored. No words exchanged. This is night literacy, reading the shelter like a living thing. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that living in breathing shelters may have reinforced a sense of environmental reciprocity, humans adjusting to structures, not dominating them. Whether that's provable or not, you feel the humility it requires. The stars fade behind cloud. The smoke hole darkens again. Attention returns inward. Breath deepens. The air feels just right. Not clean, not dirty, but alive. Historians still argue whether such conditions improved resilience or simply reflected necessity. From where you lie, the distinction blurs. Necessity teaches resilience whether you name it or not. You drift closer to sleep, lungs steady, mind calm. The night doesn't suffocate you. It holds you as long as you listen. You carry the 14th lesson of the plains into that rest. Sleep depends on balance between fire and air, body and shelter, attention and trust. You begin to notice how much of the night runs on knowledge that never announces itself. It doesn't arrive with speeches or commands. It shows up in small corrections, in quiet timing, in the way discomfort is solved before it becomes a problem. Much of that knowledge lives with the women around you. A mainstream historical fact is that in many plains societies, women were primary authorities on shelter construction, bedding preparation, fire management, and infant care, especially at night. You feel that authority now not as dominance but as competence. The night runs smoother because of it. You watch how a woman adjusts a hide without waking anyone, how she anticipates the cold before it reaches the bones, how she reads a child's restless breathing and intervenes before crying begins. These actions are precise and practiced. They aren't improvisations. They're skills refined over generations. Historians still argue whether women's nighttime knowledge was formally taught or learned almost entirely through observation and repetition. Lying here, you suspect formal lessons would have been redundant. The night itself is a strict teacher. Corrects mistakes immediately. Your first light joke arrives quietly as you observe this smooth competence. You realize that winging it is a luxury invented by central heating. Women's expertise extends beyond warmth. They understand pacing, when to add fuel to the fire, when to let it die lower, when smoke will thicken, when air must be encouraged. They know which hides breathe better and which seal tighter. These decisions shape sleep quality more than anyone openly admits. A quirky tidbit recorded by some early observers is that women could identify individual hides by touch alone in the dark, recognizing texture and weight instantly. You believe it. The way hands move here isn't searching. It's remembering. You think about how invisible this labor often was to outsiders. Explorers and settlers wrote about warriors and hunts, about danger and drama. They rarely lingered on the steady intelligence that made it possible to sleep and wake up at all. The night hid that knowledge well. Your second joke slips in as you settle deeper into your bedding. You realize survival manuals tend to skip the chapter titled, "Someone quietly fixed this while you were asleep." Women also carry night knowledge about bodies, how they respond to cold, hunger, illness, and fear. Cough is not just a cough. A shiver is not just cold. Patterns matter. Changes matter. Intervention is subtle and early. Crisis is avoided by attention. Historians still argue whether this caregiving knowledge gave women disproportionate influence within the camp. Influence might be the wrong word. Dependence feels closer. The group relies on this expertise whether or not it is named. You feel it when a baby stirs. Before sound escapes, movement answers. A shift, a murmur, a hand. Sleep continues for everyone else. This is not sacrifice. It's fluency. The night flows better because someone speaks its language. Your third joke appears softly as you consider this fluency. You realize sleeping like a baby is misleading. Babies sleep because someone else is very awake. Women's knowledge also includes when not to act. Overtending can be as disruptive as neglect. You see restraint practiced with the same skill as intervention. A child murmurs and settles on their own. No need to interfere. Confidence in the system prevents unnecessary disruption. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that women's nighttime roles may have shaped early understandings of emotional regulation, teaching calm through presence rather than correction. Whether or not that's provable, you feel the calm radiating outward. The night carries risks unique to women as well. Pregnancy discomfort, menstrual pain, exhaustion layered over responsibility. These realities are not dramatized here. They're accommodated, bedding adjusted, tasks redistributed. Survival doesn't run on ideals. It runs on adaptation. Historians still argue whether gendered night roles were rigid or fluid across tribes and seasons. From here, they feel responsive rather than fixed. Skill determines role more than identity. Knowledge shifts as bodies and circumstances change. Your fourth joke drifts in as you stretch slightly. You realize flexibility is easier to admire when it's keeping you warm. Women also pass knowledge quietly between generations. A glance, a correction of hand placement, a whispered reminder. Teaching happens without ceremony. Mastery is expected, not praised loudly. The reward is continuity. You notice how this knowledge persists even when conditions change. New materials arrive. Pressures increase. The principles remain. Warmth, timing, tension. These are constants. Tools change. Wisdom adapts. Your fifth joke sneaks in as the fire settles again. You realize that trial and error mostly means someone else already made the errors. As the night deepens, women rest too. Their vigilance is not endless. Systems allow them to sleep because the knowledge has been shared. Redundancy protects everyone. No one is indispensable, but everyone is valued. You lie there, warm and steady, aware that the night you're surviving so calmly is the result of countless unseen decisions made long before you arrived. The 15th lesson settles in with your breath. Survival is often maintained by those whose work is quiet enough to be mistaken for nothing at all. You expect silence. That's what sleep usually promises in the modern imagination. An absence of sound, a padded quiet where nothing interrupts the mind. Instead, you find yourself surrounded by noise. Not chaos, not clamor, just presence. The teepee speaks constantly, hides flex and settle. Holes creak faintly as temperature shifts. The fire pops and sighs. Outside, wind combs the grass. Somewhere far off, an animal moves. None of it is loud enough to demand attention, but none of it disappears either. A mainstream historical fact is that pre-industrial sleep environments were rarely silent, and many indigenous communities slept amid continuous natural and human-made sounds. Silence as a sleeping condition is a modern invention. You feel how unnatural total quiet would be here. Historians still argue whether humans sleep better with background noise or whether people simply adapt to whatever soundscape they grow up in. Lying here, you suspect both are true. The body learns what normal sounds like, and what doesn't. Your first light joke arrives as the fire crackles sharply. You realize that this entire soundscape would be labeled a sleep disorder by someone trying to sell you earplugs. What surprises you is how these sounds don't keep you awake. They hold you in a shallow awareness that feels protective rather than exhausting. When something changes, a new sound, a sudden absence, you notice immediately. The constant noise becomes a baseline, a reference point. You think about how dangerous silence could be. In a place like this, silence might mean the fire has gone out, or the wind has stopped too suddenly, or something is close enough to be holding its breath. Noise confirms continuity. Noise means life is still unfolding as expected. A quirky tidbit from sleep researchers suggests that irregular but familiar sounds may actually stabilize sleep by preventing sudden, startling contrasts. You feel that effect now. The night hums at a steady volume, like a living thing breathing. Historians still argue whether such soundscapes influence dream content. Considering how often your dreams borrow from wind and fire, you suspect they do. The mind doesn't shut the world out. It weaves it in. Your second joke drifts in as a sleeper nearby snores gently. You realize that snoring has been socially tolerated for much longer than headphones have existed. People don't apologize for noise here. They also don't ignore it completely. Sound is shared territory. You learn which noises require response and which ones don't. Cough is noted. A shift is ignored. A sharp intake of breath draws attention. This shared understanding reduces anxiety. You're not alone with every sound. The group holds it with you. Interpretation is communal. Fear dissipates when it's distributed. Historians still argue whether communal sleeping reduced or increased stress. Lying here, you feel the paradox resolved. Stress exists, but it's diluted. No one carries it alone. Your third joke slips in as you adjust slightly. You realize that noise complaints feel very different when the noise is proof that everyone else is still alive. The lack of silence also changes how you fall asleep. You don't wait for quiet. You sink into rhythm. Breathing synchronizes with the fire. Muscles loosen in response to repetition. Sleep arrives sideways, not head-on. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that humans evolved to sleep lightly in groups, maintaining partial awareness while still resting deeply enough to recover. You feel that layered state now, restful but responsive. The night doesn't demand total unconsciousness. It asks for balance. Awareness without anxiety. Rest without surrender. You notice that when a sound briefly startles you, recovery is fast. There's no spiraling alertness. The baseline returns quickly. The nervous system trusts the environment because it has learned its patterns. Historians still argue whether modern insomnia is partly a mismatch between ancient nervous systems and artificial silence. Lying here, the idea feels plausible. Silence can feel like emptiness, and emptiness can feel unsafe. Your fourth joke floats up as you relax again. You realize that peace and quiet might actually be a very loud concept. As hours pass, the soundscape shifts subtly. The fire lowers. Wind changes direction. Breathing deepens. Each change is small, but your mind tracks them effortlessly. You don't wake fully. You adjust. Eventually, sound recedes into the background of dreaming. Not gone, just woven in. Dreams echo crackles and creaks. Sleep remains porous, but stable. You drift deeper now, accepting the night as it is, not as you imagined it should be. The 16th lesson settles gently around you. Sleep doesn't require silence. It requires familiarity, rhythm, and the comfort of shared presence. You feel it before you name it. The subtle slowing, the soft gathering of bodies and attention, the sense that night is no longer testing you, but inviting you to settle fully. This doesn't happen by accident. It's guided by small, repeated rituals that signal safety, closure, and readiness for rest. A mainstream historical fact is that many Native American communities practiced consistent evening routines, simple actions repeated nightly, to prepare the body and mind for sleep. These weren't ceremonial in a formal sense. They were practical rhythms that told everyone, now is the time to rest. You notice them in the way the fire is adjusted, not fed aggressively, not left to chance, but coaxed into a steady, low heat. In the way tools are repositioned slightly, moved from day use to night readiness. In the way voices soften without anyone requesting it. Historians still argue whether these routines functioned primarily as cultural traditions or biological cues. Lying here, you feel the distinction blur. Culture shapes biology. Biology reinforces culture. The night doesn't separate them. Your first light joke arrives quietly as you settle deeper. You realize these are bedtime routines without a single productivity app in sight. Hands move deliberately now. A hide is shaken once and laid flat. Bedding is smooth, not fussed over. Movements are economical. Wasteful motion burns energy and attracts attention. Efficiency calms the nervous system. You feel your own body responding. Muscles loosen. Breath lengthens. Even your thoughts begin to slow, not because you force them to, but because everything around you is decelerating. A quirky tidbit recorded in some oral histories is that certain actions, like stepping over someone's bedding or blocking the entrance unnecessarily, were avoided at night, believed to disturb sleep and invite misfortune. Whether symbolic or practical, the result is the same: respect for shared rest. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were superstitions or behavioral safeguards. You suspect they functioned as both. Stories teach caution. Caution protects sleep. Your second joke drifts in as you carefully shift your position. You realize "don't wake the baby" is actually a highly sophisticated survival strategy. You notice that these rituals don't end abruptly. They taper. There's no clear line where preparation stops and sleep begins. The transition is gradual, allowing the mind to follow the body rather than fight it. Some people murmur short phrases: gratitude, reassurance, reminders. Not prayers exactly, but acknowledgments. The day has ended. The night has begun. Naming that shift seems to matter. A mainstream historical understanding is that many indigenous belief systems emphasize balance and continuity rather than sharp divisions. You feel that philosophy embodied here. Day and night are not enemies. They're phases. Historians still argue whether such routines improved sleep efficiency or simply reflected necessity. Either way, the effect is undeniable. You feel anchored, less restless, more willing to let go. Your third joke slips in softly as your eyelids grow heavy. You realize that one more thing before bed has always been a lie. Rituals also protect against rumination. When you follow a sequence you trust, the mind doesn't have to invent worries. It knows what comes next. Predictability becomes comfort. Children learn these rituals early, participating before understanding. Elders maintain them almost unconsciously. The system persists because it works, not because it's enforced. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that these nightly patterns acted as early forms of cognitive behavioral regulation, training the brain to associate certain actions with rest. You feel the truth of that in your own slowing thoughts. The fire reaches its night state. Tools are still, ready but unobtrusive. The teepee settles into its resting posture. Everything that needs attention has been given it. Historians still argue whether modern sleep struggles stem partly from the loss of such rituals. Lying here, you imagine how jarring it must be to expect sleep without preparation, like trying to stop a moving body all at once. Your fourth joke floats in as you finally surrender to stillness. You realize that "just go to bed" is terrible advice without a runway. As the last movements cease, the rituals dissolve into habit. Nothing dramatic marks the moment sleep takes over. That's intentional. Sleep arrives gently when it's not challenged. You sink deeper now, carried by repetition and trust. The 17th lesson of the plains settles around you like a familiar blanket. Rest comes easier when the night is welcomed, not rushed or resisted. The night is not always gentle. Even when rituals are followed and shelter holds, bodies still falter. Cold seeps too deep. Breath catches. Pain wakes someone suddenly. Illness does not ask whether it's a good time. A mainstream historical fact is that indigenous communities developed extensive knowledge of nighttime care, using herbs, warmth, massage, and positioning to manage sickness when daylight help was unavailable. You feel that knowledge stirring now, not as alarm, but as readiness. Someone shifts near you with a sharper intake of breath than usual. Subtle, but it carries weight. The sound breaks the night's rhythm just enough to be noticed. A hand moves. A voice murmurs low. The response is immediate but restrained. Historians still argue whether night illnesses were more dangerous due to limited visibility or better managed due to constant proximity. Lying here, you sense how closeness shortens response time. No one sleeps far from help. Your first light joke surfaces quietly as tension rises. You realize that "don't Google your symptoms at 3 a.m." used to be solved by someone actually checking on you. Care begins with warmth. Extra hides are layered. Bodies shift to share heat. Fire is coaxed slightly higher without flaring. These adjustments are done with precision. Too much heat exhausts. Too little invites danger. A quirky tidbit noted in some ethnographic records is that caregivers could often tell the difference between dangerous chills and ordinary cold by the sound of a person's breathing in sleep. You listen now, realizing how much information travels through sound in the dark. Historians still argue whether herbal treatments were standardized or personalized. Here, personalization feels obvious. Remedies respond to the body, the weather, the moment. No single solution fits every night. Your second joke drifts in as someone murmurs reassurance. You realize bedside manner existed long before beds did. Pain is handled quietly. A limb is repositioned. A muscle is rubbed until it releases. Someone hums, not to soothe sentimentally, but to regulate breathing. The night supports this care by staying dim and slow. Children are especially watched during illness. A feverish child is not isolated. They are kept close, monitored through touch and breath. Separation would increase risk. Presence is treatment. Historians still argue whether constant caregiving at night led to exhaustion. The answer seems layered. Care is shared. Shifts rotate. The system absorbs strain rather than placing it all on one person. Your third joke arrives softly as you settle again. You realize "sleep when you're dead" would be a very unpopular motto here. Illness also carries meaning beyond the physical. Not moral judgment, but pattern recognition. Repeated sickness may signal imbalance. Too much exposure, not enough rest, emotional strain. These interpretations don't replace treatment. They inform prevention. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that framing illness as a shared responsibility reduced fear and shame, improving recovery. Lying here, you feel how comfort lowers tension. The body heals better when it's not alone. The night stretches on. The immediate crisis eases. Breathing steadies. The fire returns to its prior rhythm. Care recedes without announcement, folding back into the background. Historians still argue whether mortality rates were higher or lower due to these night practices. Numbers matter less here than experience. The group does what it can with what it has when it must. You drift again towards sleep, aware that vulnerability has been met, not ignored. The night resumes its quiet watch. You carry the 18th lesson of the plains with you into that rest. Survival depends not on avoiding weakness, but on responding to it together, even in the deepest hours of darkness. You feel the change before you understand it. The night is the same. Fire low, wind distant, bodies breathing. But something in the rhythm has shifted. It's subtle, like a familiar song played with a new instrument. This is what change feels like when it arrives quietly, without asking permission. A mainstream historical fact is that sustained contact with Europeans dramatically altered indigenous nighttime life, introducing new materials, new pressures, and new dangers that reshaped how people slept, sheltered, and stayed alert. You sense those changes pressing at the edges of this otherwise steady night. Metal replaces stone. Cloth replaces hide. New tools promise convenience but demand adaptation. A wool blanket warms differently than buffalo robe. A metal kettle hisses where clay once whispered. None of this is immediately worse or better. It's simply different, and difference requires learning. Historians still argue whether these changes improved night survival or undermined it. From where you lie, the answer refuses to be simple. Some nights grow warmer. Others become riskier. Resilience stretches to accommodate unfamiliar rules. Your first light joke surfaces as you imagine the first introduction of trade goods. You realize every upgrade probably came with a learning curve and at least one very cold mistake. The night absorbs change unevenly. Some practices persist stubbornly. Bodies still cluster for warmth. Fire is still treated with respect. Sound still matters. Other habits bend. Bedding arrangements shift. Tools multiply. The careful minimalism of earlier nights grows cluttered. You feel the tension between abundance and simplicity. More objects promise more control, but they also demand attention. Attention is finite, especially at night. Too many options can dull awareness rather than sharpen it. A quirky tidbit recorded by some historians notes that certain indigenous groups initially rejected metal tools for night use because they reflected firelight unpredictably, disrupting familiar visual cues. You imagine the discomfort of that. Shadows behaving differently, light bouncing where it never had before. Historians still argue whether resistance to new materials was cultural conservatism or practical caution. Lying here, you suspect it was wisdom. The night punishes novelty more harshly than the day. Disease arrives too, often quietly. Illness spreads faster than fear. Nighttime care grows more complex, more urgent. Traditional remedies are tested against unfamiliar sickness. Some help, some fail. Knowledge adapts under pressure. Your second joke drifts in softly as you consider this adaptation. You realize that trial and error becomes much less funny when the error keeps you awake coughing. The rhythms of the night change as populations are displaced. Camps compressed, movement restricted. Crowding alters airflow. Noise carries differently. Sleep grows lighter, not by choice, but by necessity. Awareness sharpens, but rest thins. Historians still argue whether these disruptions caused long-term changes in sleep patterns. From where you lie, it feels inevitable. The body adapts to stress, but adaptation has costs. You sense how trust shifts too. The night used to hold familiar threats, weather, animals, hunger. Now it holds new uncertainties. Intentions are harder to read. Sounds mean different things. Silence can signal danger or absence. Your third joke arrives quietly, edged with irony. You realize the devil you know is significantly easier to sleep next to. Yet resilience does not vanish. It mutates. Old principles are reapplied. Warmth is still shared. Vigilance is still communal. Stories still travel through the dark, now carrying warnings alongside wisdom. Women's knowledge stretches further, incorporating new materials into old systems. Elders reinterpret dreams in light of new anxieties. Children learn a night that contains both inheritance and disruption. Continuity survives, but it bends. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that cultural resilience is most visible at night, when stress is highest and pretense falls away. You feel that truth here. The night reveals what holds and what cracks. Historians still argue whether contact accelerated cultural loss or cultural transformation. Lying here, you feel both at once. Something is slipping away. Something else is being forged, quietly, in the dark. You notice how the night now carries memory of earlier nights. Change layers on top of tradition. Nothing fully disappears. Even altered, the old patterns whisper guidance. The fire settles again. Breath steadies. Sleep returns, thinner but still present. Resilience is not perfection. It is persistence. You carry the 19th lesson of the plains with you into that uneasy rest. Survival is not about freezing time. It's about carrying what matters forward, even when the night no longer looks the same. The night you're lying in now feels fuller than the first one you entered. Not louder, not brighter, just heavier with meaning. The teepee holds, the fire breathes, and your body recognizes patterns it didn't know it was learning. This is not the night of survival alone anymore. This is the night of continuity. A mainstream historical fact is that despite forced relocations, cultural suppression, and environmental upheaval, many Native American communities preserved nighttime practices. Sleep arrangements, storytelling, vigilance, and ceremonial rhythms across generations. You feel that endurance in the quiet way. Nothing here is accidental. The teepee is no longer just shelter. It's archive. Every seam remembers storms. Every pole remembers hands that lifted it before yours. The space around you holds decisions made hundreds of nights ago, refined through experience rather than theory. Historians still argue whether continuity survived because of isolation or adaptation. Lying here, the answer feels obvious. It survived because it mattered. What matters gets protected, especially in the dark. Your first light joke arrives as you adjust slightly for comfort. You realize that if these structures had instruction manuals, they'd just say, "Pay attention, don't be dumb, and listen to your elders." The night is calmer now, not because danger vanished, but because understanding deepened. You know where to listen. You know when to move. You know that stillness itself is an action. Sleep comes in layers. Light rest, deeper drifting, brief waking awareness. This pattern, often misunderstood by modern standards, was functional. Fragmented sleep kept the group responsive without sacrificing restoration. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was intentional or incidental. Here it feels like design. The night is shared, not surrendered to unconsciousness. A quirky tidbit discussed in some anthropological circles is that elders could often identify which generation someone belonged to by how they positioned themselves during sleep. You become aware of your own posture now, wondering what it would say about you. Dreams begin to matter more here, not as prophecy in a cinematic sense, but as reflection. The night becomes a conversation between body, memory, and environment. Dreams are listened to in the morning, not obeyed blindly but considered. Your second joke drifts in gently as you imagine morning dream discussions. You realize this is probably the healthiest version of, "So I had this weird dream," that's ever existed. Historians still argue whether dream sharing strengthens social bonds or reinforced belief systems. Lying here, you feel how it does both. Meaning shared is weight divided. The night teaches restraint. Fire is never more than needed. Noise is never wasted. Movement is purposeful. Excess invites risk. Simplicity protects. You sense how children absorb this without instruction. They don't need lectures. The night itself teaches. Cold corrects mistakes. Sound rewards attentiveness. Comfort reinforces cooperation. A fringe scholarly idea suggests that environments demanding nighttime awareness produce stronger communal ethics. You feel the logic of that. When survival depends on others while you sleep, selfishness becomes impractical. Your third joke arrives softly as you realize, individualism probably sleeps terribly out here. The teepee breathes with the wind. Smoke lifts. Stars shift beyond the hide. You feel small but not insignificant. You are held not just by structure but by accumulated wisdom. Historians still argue whether modern reconstructions can ever truly capture these nights. The answer doesn't matter here. What matters is that the principles remain alive: warmth, awareness, care, rhythm. The fire lowers itself naturally now. No one rushes it. Letting the night deepen is part of the process. Darkness is not the enemy. Ignorance is. You settle fully, carrying the weight of 19 lessons before this one. Survival is not dramatic. It is practiced, repeated, refined. And now, as promised, the night softens further.